Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking, well, maybe the most exclusive shortcut possible into the mind of real power. We're diving into sources that show us not the official decrees of a Roman emperor, but his private thoughts, his most vulnerable, disciplined personal reflections.
We're talking about Marcus Aurelius, right? The last of those so-called five good emperors, often gets tagged as the philosopher king.
Exactly. And it's this incredible paradox, isn't it? You've got this guy, Marcus, who's literally responsible for, well, the known world at the time.
Yeah.
An empire stretching thousands of miles.
Massive responsibility.
But his lasting legacy, the thing people still read today, it's not some grand monument. It's this collection of private notes, the Meditations.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. These were never meant for publication. They weren't for us. They were his personal, often quite grim, spiritual exercises, like a self-help manual written under the worst possible conditions.
You mean while his empire was facing?
Well, everything. Constant war, plagues, economic disaster, personal tragedy. All of it. He was dealing with nonstop warfare on the frontiers, a devastating plague, the Antonine Plague, wiping out maybe a quarter of the population, economic instability, and immense personal loss. He lost children, mentors.
So he's trying to steer this enormous ship through a hurricane, basically. And at the same time, he's trying to keep his own head straight, his own psychological compass steady.
That's it, exactly. It's the ultimate case study, maybe, in managing external chaos by mastering your internal state.
So what we're doing today is examining the practical philosophy he leaned on during all this turbulence. These meditations give us this almost forensic look at the actual techniques he was using, maybe even daily, to prep his mind for governing.
Precisely. Our mission, if you like, is to unpack the specific flavor of Stoicism Marcus adopted, how it had changed from its original Greek roots, and crucially, how he used it as a kind of psychological toolkit to just survive, let alone govern effectively, through constant crisis.
Okay, let's explore the layers of this fascinating history. How did the man who ran the world also learn to run his mind?
Right. Well, to really get Marcus's version, we kind of have to rewind a bit and look at the foundation, Stoicism itself.
Back to Greece. Zeno and the Painted Porch.
Yep, started with Zeno of Citium, then his successors like Cleanthes and Chrysippus. They were teaching in Athens in the Stoa Poikile, that's the Painted Porch, where the name comes from. And they built this really comprehensive system. It covered logic, physics, which for them included cosmology, the nature of the universe, and ethics.
And the main goal for those early Greek Stoics was virtue.
Primarily, yes. The big goal was achieving our atrente, virtue, understood as the only true good. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, was considered an indifferent.
But then philosophy travels, doesn't it? When Stoicism gets to Rome, it lands in a very different environment. Less philosophical debate club, more Senate floor and battlefield.
Exactly. The Romans were, let's be honest, builders, administrators, soldiers, lawyers. They were intensely practical people. Abstract speculation wasn't really their main interest.
So the philosophy had to adapt, fit the Roman mindset.
It absolutely did. When Stoicism became Romanized, it shifted focus to suit these practical needs. And our sources are pretty clear that by the time Marcus Aurelius comes along, a couple of centuries later, those more theoretical branches, the really complex logic and the deep dives into physics or cosmology, they were, well, essentially abandoned.
Abandoned, just like forgotten or actively pushed aside.
More like deliberately sidelined. It seems to have been a conscious triage. The Romans were less interested in, intricate logical puzzles or the ultimate nature of the cosmos.
Why, though? Was it just impatience, or was it that those things didn't seem useful when you're facing down Germanic tribes or a plague?
I think it was definitely the utility test. Marcus himself actually reflects this. He writes in the Meditations, he basically congratulates himself for not wasting time on subtle questions of physics or cosmology.
Really? He says that explicitly.
Oh, yeah. For the Roman elite, the burning questions weren't about atoms and void. They were about, how do I deal with this treacherous senator? How do I handle this incompetent general? How do I face this financial crisis or, the death of my child? Philosophy had to provide answers for that.
So its value is judged by its ability to help you govern effectively, or just cope, to maintain some inner stability.
Precisely. The goalposts shifted. While virtue, or ADT, technically remained the ultimate aim, the more immediate practical target became achieving tranquility, apatheia, or ataraxia. That became the central goal, the measure of philosophical success for many Roman Stoics.
Okay, but we need to be careful with that word, tranquility. It can sound a bit passive, like just zoning out.
Right, and that's absolutely not what they meant. It wasn't about becoming some emotionless zombie. That would actually contradict the Stoic emphasis on reason. They weren't trying to eliminate emotion entirely.
So how did they define it then, this state of apatheia?
They defined it more by what wasn't there and what was. Tranquility was this psychological state marked by the absence of negative, irrational, disturbing emotions. Things like intense grief, consuming anger, paralyzing fear, excessive anxiety. Those were seen as judgments gone wrong.
Okay, absence of the bad stuff. What about the good stuff?
Exactly. It also involved the presence of positive, rational emotions, things the Stoics called apatheia. These included rational joy, kara, rational caution, eulabia, and rational wishing or willing, boulesis. Emotions that are in line with reason and nature. So it's an active, alert, rational state of mind, just one that's impervious to irrational distress.
That sounds like a seriously powerful defense mechanism, which I guess makes total sense when you consider the environment, the sheer volatility and danger of the Roman imperial court.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want a case study in why this kind of resilience was not just a nice to have, but absolutely essential for survival, you just have to look at the life of Seneca. He comes about a century before Marcus.
Seneca the Younger, Nero's tutor. His life story is basically Exhibit A for Roman imperial chaos, isn't it?
It really is. His biography is almost the necessary prequel to understanding Marcus's mindset. Seneca lived through unbelievable political turmoil. His journey starts rough under the Emperor Claudius. He gets accused of adultery with Claudius's niece, Julia Livilla, probably a trumped-up charge.
And the result, instant banishment.
Yep, banished to Corsica, which he described as this barren and thorny rock, stuck there for 8 long years.
What does someone like Seneca do for 8 years in exile on Corsica? He didn't just sit there feeling sorry for himself, presumably.
No, far from it. That's arguably when his Stoicism became truly forged in fire. It became his lifeline. He wrote some of his most famous philosophical works during that exile, often directly addressing his situation, like the Consolation to Helvia, written to comfort his own mother back in Rome.
Trying to manage her grief and shame about his exile.
Exactly. And in it, he systematically applies Stoic principles. He argues, exile is just a change of place, not a change in your virtue. Your mind is still free. He's basically talking himself through it, using philosophy as therapy. This intense period turned him into a real intellectual force.
But Roman politics has a long reach. He didn't stay on Corsica forever. Agrippina the Younger brought him back, didn't she?
She did. Claudius's wife, and crucially, the mother of the young Nero. She engineered Seneca's recall from exile for one specific purpose, to tutor her son, Nero, who was only about 12 at the time.
So Seneca walks straight back into the heart of power, from exile to the imperial palace.
Instantly. He becomes Nero's advisor, speechwriter, essentially the guiding hand during the early, more stable years of Nero's reign. He becomes fabulously wealthy, incredibly influential, probably the most renowned citizen in Rome at that point, a literary superstar, and effectively the prime minister.
It's just staggering. The guy who used philosophy to endure exile finds himself at the absolute pinnacle of Roman power. Only to find out, I suppose, that the palace could be even more dangerous than Corsica.
He definitely realized the danger. All that wealth, all that influence, it depended entirely on Nero's whims, and Nero was becoming increasingly unstable and tyrannical. Seneca saw the writing on the wall. His success was immense, but Tacitus tells us he later tried desperately to retire.
He tried to buy his way out.
Literally. There's this poignant scene Tacitus describes where Seneca offers Nero his entire colossal fortune, hundreds of millions of sesterces, just begging to be allowed to step away from politics completely. He knew the palace had become a gilded cage, a prison.
And Nero refused.
Nero refused. Maybe he needed Seneca's reputation, maybe he feared him, who knows. But then came the Pisonian conspiracy, this plot to assassinate Nero. Seneca got implicated. Whether he was truly involved or just swept up in the paranoia, we don't know for sure.
But it didn't matter in the end.
No, it sealed his fate. Nero, deep in paranoia by this point, ordered Seneca to commit suicide.
And his death scene itself is famously stoic.
Incredibly so. He tries to open his veins. It doesn't work quickly. He takes poison. That doesn't work either because he's old and frail. Finally, he's carried into a hot bath and suffocates from the steam, all while apparently dictating philosophical thoughts to his friends. It's one of the most chilling, iconic moments in Roman history.
So this whole trajectory, exile, extreme power, and then forced suicide must have been a huge flashing warning sign for Marcus Aurelius a century later.
Absolutely. It was a brutal object lesson. If Seneca, arguably the most brilliant Stoic philosopher and one of the most powerful men of his age, couldn't control his external fate, couldn't escape the dangers of power, then the only truly reliable defense had to be internal, the fortress of the mind.
Which sets the stage perfectly for Marcus. He wasn't naive about the risks. His turning to philosophy wasn't just an intellectual hobby. It felt like an urgent necessity, grounded in the history of people like Seneca.
Exactly right. Marcus was introduced to philosophy pretty early on, but the sources suggest the really deep commitment came when he was in his early 20s. That's when Junius Rusticus became his main philosophical guide.
Rusticus. Who was he?
Rusticus was a prominent statesman, but also a very serious practical Stoic. He seems to have really steered Marcus away from the more superficial, rhetoric-focused education offered by tutors like the sophist Fronto, who Marcus was initially very close to. Rusticus effectively supplanted Fronto as the key influence.
So this marks a shift for Marcus, away from just learning how to speak eloquently, like a traditional Roman noble, and towards, what? Philosophical engineering. The practical application of ethics.
That's a good way to put it. It was a very conscious, practical turn, and Marcus, in the Meditations, is genuine and grateful for it. He thanks Rusticus for guiding him away from certain intellectual paths. He specifically mentions being glad he avoided obsessively poring over books, working out logical puzzles, or speculating about physics and cosmology.
He saw those as distractions from the real work.
It seems so. The philosophy Marcus embraced, thanks to Rusticus, was almost laser-focused on ethics, on character, on how to live rightly day by day. Immediate, actionable self-improvement.
And Rusticus didn't just influence his thinking, he apparently influenced his behavior too, even how he presented himself as Caesar in waiting.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Rusticus actively encouraged Marcus to push back against the vanity and trappings of his incredibly high status. He reportedly told Marcus to dress down whenever possible, rather than always walking around in the formal, attention-grabbing attire of a Caesar.
That's pretty unusual for someone destined for the throne, isn't it? Deliberately trying to look ordinary.
Highly unusual. Imagine the heir to the most powerful empire on earth trying to blend in. And we actually have evidence confirming this. There's a statuette that apparently shows Marcus dressed very plainly, like a common citizen, maybe from when he was traveling later in life. It's like a visual symbol of that philosophical ideal. Focus on inner worth, not external show.
But maybe the most important thing Rusticus gave him wasn't advice on clothes. It was introducing him to the work of another philosopher.
Yes. This was the game changer. Rusticus gave Marcus a copy of the discourses of Epictetus.
Epictetus, the former slave turned towering Stoic philosopher.
Exactly. Epictetus had been born a slave in Hierapolis, later gained his freedom, and eventually established a hugely influential philosophical school in Nicopolis in western Greece. By the 2nd century AD, when Marcus was learning, Epictetus utterly dominated the Stoic landscape. His teachings were paramount.
The philosophical irony there is just immense, isn't it? The man born into absolute power, the emperor, bases his entire moral and psychological framework on the teachings of a man born with literally no rights as property.
It's stunning. And while Marcus doesn't explicitly dwell on that specific irony in the Meditations, it's crystal clear how profound Epictetus's influence was. The Meditations are packed with echoes of Epictetus. Some scholars say they're essentially variations, often superbly orchestrated on themes proposed by the philosopher-slave. Epictetus was the philosophical doctor whose prescriptions Marcus followed daily.
Okay, so let's get into Epictetus's core ideas then. If the Stoic school wasn't just for abstract debate, what did Epictetus see as its purpose?
Epictetus had a very clear, very therapeutic view. He famously described the philosopher as a doctor and the philosopher's school as a hospital for souls.
A hospital for souls, I like that. So the goal wasn't just learning, it was healing.
Precisely. Profoundly therapeutic and intensely practical. The philosopher's job wasn't primarily to lecture on abstract doctrines. It was to help the student diagnose their own psychological suffering.
And what was the diagnosis, according to Dr. Epictetus? What's the source of our mental anguish?
Distorted beliefs, irrational judgments. The core task in his hospital was rigorous self-examination, analyzing your own mind, your thoughts, your automatic assumptions, your deeply ingrained beliefs about what's truly good and bad.
Like questioning why we think, say, losing wealth is inherently terrible, or why getting insulted feels like a catastrophe.
Exactly that. Epictetus's most famous maxim captures it perfectly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. It's not the external event, it's your judgment about the event that causes the suffering.
That sounds incredibly modern. That has echoes in psychology today, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This Socratic Stoic approach is the direct philosophical ancestor of modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and its forerunner, rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT.
Developed by people like Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck.
Yes, and they were very open about their debt to the Stoics. They explicitly cited Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. The fundamental shared assumption is that our emotions aren't directly caused by external events, but by our cognitions, our beliefs, our interpretations about those events.
So, identifying and then challenging and modifying those dysfunctional beliefs. That's the core of CBT, and it comes straight from Epictetus.
It's the same fundamental insight. The Stoics were doing cognitive therapy 1800 years before it got its modern name. They developed the original psychological interventions for managing emotional distress by restructuring thought patterns.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just reading this stuff. He was doing it. Practicing this ancient self-talk, this cognitive restructuring that directly inspired modern therapy.
Absolutely. The Meditations are the record of that practice. You can see them as his personal therapy journal, his daily tool for self-correction and self-mentoring. There's even a theory he might have started writing them more intensely after Rusticus died, when he essentially had to become his own Stoic guide.
And the way they're written,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't like a philosophical argument laid out once. They're full of repetition, aren't they? Like he's drilling these ideas into himself.
The repetition is the key. It's what makes the Meditations a set of spiritual exercises, not a systematic philosophical treatise. He's not trying to convince us, he's trying to embed these principles deeply into his own mind through constant reinforcement.
What are the core concepts he keeps coming back to?
The absolute centrality of judgment is probably number one. He hammers this point home again and again. All is opinion, or all is judgment. He constantly reminds himself that troubles come only from our internal judgments, writing things like, "Things cannot touch the soul, but stand without it stationary. Tumult can arise only from views within ourselves."
Wow. Things can't touch the soul, only our judgments about them.
Exactly. And the source material notes this specific idea that distress comes only from within appears at least 18 times in the Meditations. It's a relentless focus. He's constantly trying to short-circuit the tendency to blame external events for his inner state.
That constant repetition suggests he was really working at it, maybe resetting his mind every morning, given the pressures he was under. He also used these formalized lists, didn't he? Key points for focus. Kephaleia.
Yes, these kephaleia, or heads, were like summaries of core Stoic doctrines or principles, little checklists for the mind. For instance, he frequently used lists to prompt himself to analyze things, like the invitation to discern what is causal in each thing. Break it down, separate the event from your reaction.
It's about achieving clarity, right? Cutting through the noise.
Exactly. Intellectual clarity amidst what must have been overwhelming sensory input and emotional pressure. Another fascinating exercise he practiced was this mental separation of the self. The sources call it circumscribing the self.
Circumscribing the self, what does that involve?
This gets into the Stoic view of human nature. Marcus, following Stoic tradition, analyzed the human being as having three parts: the body, soma, the vital breath or life force, pneuma, and the governing principle, the intellect or nous.
Body, breath, intellect.
Now, for the Stoics, the nous, the intellect, the reasoning faculty, was the crucial part. It was seen as a fragment of the divine logos, the universal reason residing within each human. And critically, it's the only part that is truly yours, the only part fundamentally under your control.
So the body and the breath aren't really you in the same way.
Not in the core sense. They require care, like you'd care for your tools or your house. But they are ultimately external, vulnerable, not up to you. The nous, your capacity for reason and judgment, that is the real you. That's your citadel.
So the exercise of circumscribing the self is about mentally drawing a line around that intellect, separating it from the other parts.
Precisely. He instructs himself to use his dianoia, which is the process of thinking, the mind in action, to isolate his nous from everything else. From the sensations of the body, pain, illness, pleasure, from the impulses of the vital breath, and crucially, from external events and reputations.
So he's asking himself, is this feeling coming from my body? Is this just a physiological reaction? Or is it a judgment made by my nous, the part that is actually free?
Exactly. By constantly performing this mental separation, this circumscription, he aimed to keep his focus purely on the quality of his judgments and volitions, the only things truly within his power. He's building internal boundaries.
It sounds like a kind of philosophical filtering system, tuning out the noise of physical discomfort or what other people think, and keeping the signal clear, the integrity of his own rational mind.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Psychological boundary setting at the highest level, ensuring that nothing external, not pain, not praise, not political pressure, not even the plague, could truly harm or contaminate the core of his being, his rational self.
This ruthless focus on the internal brings us right to what is maybe the foundational principle Marcus got from Epictetus, the ultimate shield against chaos, the dichotomy of control.
Ah, yes. This is the absolute centerpiece of practical Stoicism, especially as taught by Epictetus, and you see it running through Marcus's meditations constantly.
Break it down for us. What is the dichotomy of control?
It's incredibly simple in principle, but profoundly difficult in practice. Epictetus taught that everything in human experience falls into one of two categories: things that are up to us and things that are not up to us.
Okay, what falls into the up to us category?
Essentially, our inner world. Our judgments, our opinions, our intentions, our desires, our aversions, our acts of will, basically how we choose to respond to things, our volition.
And not up to us.
Pretty much everything else, our body, whether it's healthy or sick, our possessions, our reputation, what others think of us, our social status, the actions of other people, external events, health, wealth, life, death, the outcome of our actions, the list goes on.
So basically, our internal responses are up to us, and everything external is not.
That's the core distinction. And the immediate consequence of understanding this, according to Epictetus, is realizing where to place your efforts and your emotional investment. Meaning, if you waste your energy trying to control things that are not up to you, you are guaranteed frustration, anxiety, and suffering. If you tie your happiness or your sense of self-worth to your reputation or to staying healthy forever or to the outcome of a war, things you ultimately don't control, you're setting yourself up for misery. You're handing over your inner peace to external chance.
Whereas if you focus only on what is up to you, the quality of your judgments, the integrity of your actions,
then theoretically, nothing external can truly disturb you. Your tranquility becomes untouchable because it depends only on your own choices, which are always within your power.
Epictetus had a great little story to illustrate this, didn't he? About the man worried about his brother's anger.
Yes, it's a classic Epictetus anecdote, perfectly illustrating the principle. Arian, who wrote down Epictetus's lectures, tells us a student came to Epictetus really upset, asking, "What can I do? My brother is angry with me. How can I stop him being angry?"
A very relatable problem. What did Epictetus say?
His answer was blunt and immediate. Nothing. You can do nothing about his anger.
Because the brother's emotional state is external. It's not up to us.
Precisely. Epictetus forces the student to see that the brother's anger belongs to the brother. It arises from the brother's judgments, which are outside the student's control. The student's real problem isn't the brother's anger itself, but the student's own judgment that the brother's anger is a terrible, unbearable thing that he must fix.
So the focus shifts. Don't try to manage the external person, manage your internal reaction to them.
Exactly. Epictetus tells him, essentially, look after your own reactions. That's your business. His anger is his business. It's a radical redirection of focus inward.
And this applies not just to other people's emotions, but to the results of our own actions too, right? This leads to the outcome paradox.
Yes, the archery analogy is often used here, attributed to the earlier Stoic Antipater. It clarifies this beautifully.
How does that go?
Okay, so an archer's goal, naturally, is to hit the target. That's the preferred outcome. But the Stoic argues the archer's true good, their basis for rational satisfaction, cannot lie in actually hitting the bullseye.
Why not? Isn't that the whole point?
Because hitting the bullseye is not entirely up to the archer. It's an outcome influenced by external factors. Like a sudden gust of wind, a fault in the bowstring, maybe the target itself is flawed, maybe someone bumps their arm. Fate, chance, these things intervene. These are not up to us.
So what is up to the archer?
The effort, the intention, the preparation, the correct stance, the careful aim, the smooth release, focusing all their skill and attention on performing the action of shooting as perfectly as possible. That is within their control.
So happiness, or maybe Stoic satisfaction, has to be tied to the quality of the effort, the striving, not the result.
Exactly. If the archer does everything correctly, shoots with perfect form and intention, but the wind blows the arrow off course, they haven't failed in what truly matters, maintaining their virtue, acting according to their best rational judgment. They have done their part. The outcome was external.
You can see how vital that would be for someone like Marcus, leading armies, dealing with plagues.
Absolutely critical. He could plan the battle strategy meticulously, gather the best intelligence, equip the troops, do everything up to him. But he couldn't ultimately control the weather on the day, the enemy's unexpected move, or whether his soldiers would catch the plague. His job was to act rightly, make the best possible decisions, and accept the outcome, whatever it was, with equanimity.
And speaking of things not up to him, mortality.
Yeah.
He had to confront death on a scale we can barely imagine. The Antonine Plague was raging through his reign.
Yes, the plague was a constant, terrifying backdrop. It likely swept through the empire for 15 years or more, brought back by troops returning from the Parthian War in the east. Estimates vary, but it might have killed millions, maybe 5 million, possibly up to a quarter of the population in the hardest hit areas. It was devastating.
So Marcus wasn't just contemplating death in the abstract, he was living with it, seeing it everywhere, daily.
Constantly. And he uses the contemplation of mortality, memento mori as a core spiritual exercise in the Meditations. He confronts his own inevitable death and the deaths of everyone around him very directly.
How did he approach it? Did he use specific techniques?
One technique was using historical examples to kind of flatten the significance of individual lives, including his own. He'd list famous figures from the past, great generals like Camillus or Scipio, emperors like Augustus or Hadrian, and then immediately remind himself that they are all dead and gone.
To emphasize the universality of death.
Exactly. He points out that everyone, from Alexander the Great down to the guy who drove Alexander's mules, ends up in the same place. Dust and ashes. King and commoner, conqueror and conquered, death is the great equalizer. Remembering this helped strip his own imperial status of its ultimate importance. We're all just ephemeral beings.
And the sources suggest this wasn't just abstract thinking for him. He connected this universal truth directly to his own physical experiences, his own illnesses.
Yes, that's one of the most striking and human things about the Meditations. His philosophical reflections on death are often punctured by references to his own physical frailty. He mentions things like coughing fits, possibly coughing up blood, recurring fevers, stomach problems.
He used his own symptoms as evidence.
As reminders. As concrete proof that his body was fragile, temporary, ultimately not him in the core Stoic sense. He'd use the discomfort not as a reason to complain, but as fuel for the exercise. See, you are just matter, soon to dissolve. You are just another dead man waiting to happen, soon to be forgotten. By facing it so squarely, he aimed to reduce the fear of it.
Another technique mentioned is the view from above. That sounds like a kind of mental zoom out.
It is. It's a classic Stoic visualization technique designed to provide cosmic perspective and shrink down earthly anxieties. Marcus would deliberately imagine himself ascending high above the earth, looking down on the whole world.
What was the point of that?
To gain perspective, he writes things like, "The whole earth is but a point, your habitation but a tiny nook thereon." From that imagined cosmic vantage point, all the human dramas, the wars, the political squabbles, the anxieties about reputation, the daily stresses of running the empire, they start to look minuscule, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe.
It puts things in perspective, deflates the ego and the perceived importance of immediate problems.
Precisely. It's a powerful antidote to self-importance and worry. If the whole world is just a speck, then my problems on this speck are even smaller.
But this cosmic perspective inevitably led him to wrestle with a huge philosophical question. What is the nature of that cosmos he's viewing? Is it intelligently ordered, or is it just random chaos?
Yes, he bumps up against this fundamental uncertainty again and again in the Meditations. It's clear he genuinely grappled with it. He constantly poses the alternative. Is the universe governed by a benevolent, rational providence, pronoia, a divine intelligence ensuring everything happens for a reason as part of a grand plan?
Or the alternative?
Or is it all just, as he sometimes puts it, a fortuitous concourse of atoms, just blind atoms colliding randomly in an infinite void with no overarching purpose or design? This reflects the debate between Stoic providence and Epicurean atomism.
That must have been deeply unsettling for someone trying to live a rational, ordered life. If the universe itself might be fundamentally chaotic, how did he resolve that tension? Providence versus atoms.
Well, his ultimate resolution was remarkably pragmatic. He essentially concluded that for the purpose of living a good life, it doesn't actually matter which view is true.
Really? How could it not matter?
Because, he reasoned, the correct practical response is the same in either case. If the universe is ruled by a wise providence, then you should accept everything that happens as part of a divine, rational plan, even the seemingly bad stuff. It's all for the best, ultimately. Accept your fate. amor fati.
Okay, that makes sense for providence. What if it's just random atoms?
If it's just random atoms, then events have no inherent meaning or purpose. They just happen. In which case, getting upset or anxious about random, meaningless events is irrational and pointless. The wise person still accepts what happens because resisting blind chance is futile and focuses on their own actions, which are meaningful because they stem from reason.
So either way, accept what happens externally and focus on acting virtuously internally.
Exactly. Whether it's fate or atoms, the practical prescription remains. Acceptance of the external and commitment to rational, just action in response. He brackets the metaphysical uncertainty and focuses on the ethical imperative.
Which brings us to the social dimension. His Stoicism wasn't just about inner peace for himself. It had strong implications for how he treated others, right? Even as emperor.
Absolutely. Stoicism has a powerful social and ethical core. It wasn't just about individual resilience. It was deeply concerned with our duties to others. This comes from the Stoic concept of oikiosis.
Oikiosis, what's that?
It literally means something like appropriation or making one's own. The idea is that we naturally start by caring for ourselves, then extend that care outwards in concentric circles to our family, our friends, our local community, our country, and ultimately, because we all share in divine reason, logos, to all of humanity.
So it leads to cosmopolitanism, seeing yourself as a citizen of the world.
Precisely. Stoics believed we have a fundamental kinship with all other human beings simply because we are all rational creatures. This implies a duty of care and justice towards everyone, regardless of their origin or station. Marcus frequently refers to the cosmopolis, the world city.
That's a demanding standard for anyone, let alone an emperor dealing with enemies, traitors, and incompetence. How did he square that with the harsh realities of power, especially the need to be kind, even to those who actively oppose you?
That was perhaps one of the most challenging applications of his Stoicism. He constantly reminds himself to maintain kind affections, even towards those who stand in his way or cause trouble. He saw getting enraged at them or giving up on doing the right thing because they were behaving badly as a failure on his part.
A sign of weakness, almost, to let their bad behavior dictate his own.
Exactly. He writes that it's a sign of weakness to be enraged or to desist from right practice because of others' faults. Their injustice is their problem, stemming from their ignorance of true good and evil. His duty was to remain steadfast. He says the one truly valuable thing is to live life pursuing a steady course of truth, justice, and humanity toward even the false and unjust.
Wow. Maintaining humanity towards the unjust. That requires incredible discipline.
It does. Their actions are external, not up to him. His response, his commitment to justice and kindness is up to him. That internal standard remains absolute, regardless of external provocation.
That really paints the clearest picture of the philosopher king in action. Not just thinking lofty thoughts, but actively refusing to let the immense pressures and darkness of his world compromise the integrity of his own mind and actions, drilling these principles daily while leading Rome through one of its toughest periods.
He's the ultimate case study in applied Stoicism under extreme pressure. The Meditations aren't just reflections, they're the raw data, the evidence of his daily psychological and spiritual struggle. He was turning philosophical theory into immediate, practical, survival-oriented exercises for the mind, building that inner fortress while the outer world was, in many ways, crumbling. So what does this all mean for us looking back at Marcus and Epictetus?
Well, it seems the big takeaway is that this idea of freedom, true inner freedom, isn't something we're just born with. It's not a given.
Not at all. They taught that it's an achievement, an arduous, ongoing project that requires constant work, constant vigilance over our own minds.
If we take that dichotomy of control seriously, then we're only truly free when we master our own judgments, our own responses, and stop tying our well-being to things outside our control.
Right. And Epictetus was very clear about the path to that freedom. He said the only way to achieve it, the only way to escape enslavement, whether it's enslavement to anger, anxiety, ambition, or external circumstances, is to be able to say wholeheartedly, "Lead me, Zeus, and you, fate, wherever you have ordained for me."
Wholehearted acceptance of fate, combined with mastery of the self, limiting our desires only to what's truly up to us.
That's the Stoic recipe for freedom. It means embracing whatever happens externally while ensuring our internal responses are always rational, virtuous, and aligned with nature.
Which completely reframes how we usually think about freedom, doesn't it? If it's something that has to be earned through constant self-discipline and philosophical practice.
Then it leads to a pretty provocative thought. It suggests that, in a way, we are not born free. We are born as potential slaves, slaves to our impulses, our fears, our desires for external things, our reactions to events. We only become free by achieving that internal mastery.
We have to earn our freedom through this continuous struggle and self-discipline. We are all, in that sense, potential slaves until we achieve that state of inner command.
And that really leaves us with a challenge, doesn't it? The question Marcus's life and writings pose to us today is pretty direct. If freedom is this earned state of self-mastery, what are you doing right now, today, to move yourself closer to that hard-won freedom?